and welcome everyone. We hope you're having a great day so far and you've been enjoying a manufacturing month of the season. We want to thank you for joining us for our webinar on employee safety and risk management horror stories. My name is Nancy Patton and I'll be your moderator behind the scenes today. Before we dive into our presentation, I have just a few housekeeping notes that I'd like to cover. First, everyone has been muted to limit disruptions. If you have questions, you're welcome to share them with us using that questions feature located in your control panel. Our team will follow up with you after the webinar on your questions. You can expect an email tomorrow with links to the recording along with the slide deck, so be on the lookout for that. Finally, upon leaving the webinar, you'll be prompted to complete a very short survey. We'd like to hear all your feedback that you have for us and what other presentations you'd like us to cover in the future. Today we are with Saltmarsh Shareholder Suzanne Cox, and she is joined by Michele Mathews, who is the founder of Mathews HR Safety Consulting. Michele is a certified safety management specialist and an OSHA construction and general industry authorized trainer. That was a mouthful. She has over 20 years of human resource management within multiple industries, including construction, healthcare, manufacturing, and nonprofits. As a reminder, this presentation is approved for one SHRM PDC and one HRCI credit activity hour. And there's lots of things for us to cover today, so I'm going to pass it right over to Suzanne to get us started. Suzanne?
Thanks, Nancy. I was glad that you took Michele's credentials because that was a mouthful. So we're so excited to have you today, Michele. We, as just in the course of our world, we're out at clients all the time, client sites, job sites, sometimes counting inventory or looking at the progression of a job. And we continuously get questions about, what are the requirements for me? What are the regulations? And of course, as a CPA, we don't know all those. And so we're glad to have you here to give our clients some advice on how they can avoid, some of these horror stories that you're about to tell us. And if they need any help in managing their OSHA compliance and their regulation books that they keep internally, that's what you're here for. So we're, again, glad to have you, Michele. So I'll kick it over to you.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I'm glad to be here. And I can tell you, there's been many a times where people are like, you're telling me too many scary things. So I have on the screen right now just a little bit about my background. They did cover that in the beginning, so thank you. I know it is a lot, but my goal is just to make sure you are being compliant and your staff are safe. I grew up in construction, then I moved to healthcare, manufacturing, and then I started helping businesses of all industries. Manufacturing is near and dear to my heart because my parents actually own a manufacturing business now in Oldsmar. So that's how we kind of connected, and I just thought this was a great idea because a lot of the times people don't know what they don't know.
That's exactly right. It's usually after they find out, oh, I wasn't supposed to do that.
Yes, absolutely. And so this is like the first big one that people don't realize. Under OSHA, regardless of what industry you fall under, we all have a general duty 5A clause. And this is up on your screen right now. And it says you are required to furnish to each of your employee a workplace that's safe and healthy and free from recognized hazards that are causing or likely to cause death or serious physical harm. So that's a lot on your shoulders, don't you think?
Absolutely. But is there anything that falls on the employees? Do they have any responsibility, or does it all fall onto our client?
Great question. A lot of the times people don't realize that, yes, we have general duty 5A for the employers, but general duty 5B is the actually employee side. And I recommend you have this in your handbooks and all your written policies and remind your staff and have them sign off on it. They have a regulation to follow all of your safety rules and regulations, including OSHA's. So OSHA is the minimum standard. You can expand on that for safety of your team. They have to follow it. And if not, with it being part of the OSHA standards and your policies, you can hold them accountable, even go to corrective action if needed, or worst case, take them off your job because they're not being safe for you or your employees.
Okay, that's good to know. So if you mentioned something when you are onboarding, say a new employee, they should be receiving a copy of your handbook. Now, is it a requirement for them to sign off that they received it? Is that an HR requirement?
So requirement, not necessarily, but it is best practice,
Okay.
because when it comes to things later on, they're going to say, how did the
I never
employee
got
know it?
that. Okay, got it.
Yeah,
Good to
great
know.
question.
And do you help people write safety manuals? Is that part of your consulting services?
We do, yes. We really maintain the manufacturing, healthcare, construction, and general industry side of the house. If it's agricultural or maritime, that's not our specialty, so I do refer it out for someone else. But yes, what we're talking about today are ones I am able to cover as my business practice.
Awesome, thanks.
Absolutely. All right, so we promised you some horror stories. I'm gonna tell you, I did not put any gore in this, but the stories are bad. So I do have some pictures that I'm gonna share with you. Here's one in the Tampa Bay area. Unfortunately, this was their storage unit. They have a mixture of things in here. You can see propane, you can see unregulated gas containers, and then we have chemicals that are not labeled.
Yeah, this
So
looks like a disaster. And it's funny because, you know, when we go on site, like I was saying, to either visit a job or do inventory, you can tell immediately the difference between a client that has their stuff together and the client that needs your help because, you know, sometimes you're in, say, a heel and you're having to tiptoe around because there's things you have to step over and they're like, oh, be careful, be careful. And in other places, you're fine to just, you know, roam around no matter what you're wearing and there are no safety precautions. So I feel like I've been here.
well, unfortunately, this happens more times than I care to admit with some new clients and people who then choose not to have me as a client because they said I pointed out too many issues. But yes, I always carry boots in my trunk, so I look like I'm maybe living a double life, but I'm not. I just always want to make sure I'm prepared when I walk in
That's a
somewhere.
good idea. Yeah, we started doing that. You know, many years ago when I started in construction, I started my first inventory wearing a heel, and then the next one I brought sneakers and boots.
Absolutely. So what happened with this situation is the gentleman walked in and he was trying to get this chemical that he needed to use to add to one of the machines. Unfortunately, this blue one was not sealed all the way and it was above where he was going to get the chemical he needed, and it fell on his face,
Ooh.
causing it to get in his eyes, in his mouth, etc. He then had to manipulate his way out of this storage area and find the nearest eye wash station because he needed to rinse this out. So this is the eye wash station he came upon.
Yikes.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want anything coming out of this sprinkler.
Touch my eye.
Exactly. So he had no other choice but to use this. It wasn't maintained properly like it's supposed to be, and he ended up getting really damaged in the eye. He has some scratches on his cornea. He
Yikes.
lost vision in one of his eyes for many months, and he's just started to get most of it back. But it would have been maybe not as damaging if we had a clean and well taken care of first aid emergency eye wash station. Yeah, so that's horror story number one.
So what would be like in this case, uh, to back up, just having a clean eye wash station probably would have solved that. Was there any issue also with the chemical having fell on him? Was it improperly stored? So those would be some things to look at as well. And I know later we're going to talk about like the top 10 things, which is great. So yeah, both of those seem like that would have prevented the situation then.
Yes, great question. So I'm going to go back even one more slide. So you see here on your right with the blue container, it has a somewhat of a compliant label. It's missing the pictograms, but it doesn't tell us what's in there. So we had to guess what he was exposed to. and look for the safety data sheet, figure out what we needed to do. Was it rinse for 15 minutes or do something else, just cover the eye? Then also, what did the doctor need to do? So yes, it was stored improperly. They always say if it's a chemical that could cause damage on the face, that's a more severe area. So they always tell you to keep things shoulder or below for chemicals and things like that. Also, make sure your lids are on tight, because maybe it would have just, I know this sounds bad
Bounced
as well.
off?
Yeah, maybe it would have just bounced on him and not poured down him.
Right. That's what I was thinking too. If it stayed shut, it would have just hit him in the head. Maybe that would have been a lot less severe.
Yes, absolutely. So you can see in the picture with all of the storage happening, even some of the Rust-Oleum and the spray paint and the kills is above shoulder height, and so any of that stuff could easily fall on someone. So yes, definitely proper storage.
I'm taking notes for my own garage right now as well. I feel like I have things on the top shelves.
We're also going to talk a little bit later, and I'll show you another picture about proper walkways. So there's all kinds of trip hazards here. So the fact that he got to the wonderful eye wash station is amazing, and that he didn't trip and have other serious injuries.
Yeah.
So yeah, this dear old wash station. So it does need to be checked minimally monthly to make sure that it's cool water coming out, that it's clean. Plus those little flapper caps are supposed to be on top of it, because that's supposed to prevent dirt and debris from getting in. I always tell you, make sure you're checking it that it's cool water. So I use a bucket over these type and let it run for a few minutes, because in one of my referred communities that my clients were in, they found out that the plumbing company accidentally hooked up the hot water to the emergency eye wash station. Yep.
I don't think you want hot water spraying in your eye.
Yeah, definitely important to check that. All right, so we're going to go to our next one. This picture on your left is showing you the forklift that has the key still in it. I zoomed in on the key still in it on purpose. And then the other picture is an emergency exit that's blocked, okay? So what happened here is someone who was not authorized to use the forklift and not properly trained got on the forklift and started causing a ruckus. An employee tried to exit out of the emergency exit and unfortunately was not able to because it was blocked. And he had a severe injury and loss of leg. And for a few moments, they thought he actually had lost his life, but they were able to revive him.
So in that case, would the employee that was screwing around on the forklift have any liability for this, or does it all fall on the employer?
It all falls on the employer.
Gotcha. Good to know.
Yep.
Those things happen.
Yeah, we could, if it's in our policy, write them up or possibly even discharge for failing to follow proper safety policies. That's where we're going to bring in your consultant and your attorney. I'm not an attorney, and they earn their money for just cause, okay?
Right.
But you should never store your your forklift key on the forklift. Only authorized people who are properly trained and on your equipment. Not that they come in and they've got forklift and other lift training. It has to be your specific equipment. You got to make sure that you're controlling that, because this could have easily been probably lessened or not even happen if we didn't have anyone could walk by and jump on that forklift.
Right, and then secondary, if the exit had been clear, the other employee could have easily escaped, and that would have prevented him from getting hurt as well. So there's, again, a couple things at hand. It sounds like a lot of these situations are more than one just thing, just one thing. They're multiple things. So
Absolutely, yeah. And I can tell you, having an emergency exit blocked, having a fire extinguisher blocked, those are going to be on willful levels. And I'm going to show you how bad a willful can be when it comes to fines for the employer. And you can't pass that on to the employee.
Right.
Just as bad is if you're using temporary help. And we'll talk about your exposure there too, but if they're jumping on your forklifts, or if it's someone's first day, or they're blocking your emergency exits, they're putting your other employees at risk or jeopardy as well. So it's under your control that you have to watch and constantly monitor that stuff. And that's why doing safety walkthroughs and safety audits are really important.
For sure.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I'm going to move on to our next one. And this one is also in the Tampa Bay area. This is a rebarb bending machine. There is a setup in this manufacturing section of 5 different machines. And because of the need, there are 2 shifts that are working on these equipment. Now, all the equipment looks very similar. They're all computer generated. So you put in the schematics and then it runs it. You just feed the pipe in, pop it out, and those types of things. But the computer handles all of that. Now, out of these multiple machines, one of them, which is the one you're looking at right now, this is where someone got hurt. This one is one that if something happens and the machine has to stop and then restart, it restarts all the way from the very beginning, okay? The other machines, they just restart where they were, so they don't go back to the beginning, okay? The only reason I know this is because after the incident, I went and asked these questions to figure out what happened. There's no signage. The gentleman from the second shift moved to first shift and they put him on this machine. They assumed that he knew what to do because he's been working on these machines for a while. He also assumed he knew what to do because he's been working on these machines for a while. He didn't realize that it started back over. The picture of the glove shows that the ring finger had been hit. The gentleman who's in the picture, this is actually his glove. He knows it restarted and he only got hit. The gentleman who started on this new equipment on first shift didn't know it restarted. He is without a finger because he didn't know that it started back over. So he put his hand in to grab it to take it.
Yikes.
Mm-hmm.
So in this case, would it be not just signage as well, but training also, like to make sure that even though that somebody had been working there a long time, that they were formally trained on all the different pieces of equipment, right?
Yep. They actually would like you to, if they're moving to a new shift, new equipment, that type of thing, give them a retraining.
Yeah.
Same with any chemicals. If it's new to them, they have to get training on it, or if their assignment changes. Yes.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, those are some of our kickoff horror stories. I'll move on to some other things and we'll come back to some other stories, but I want to give you a little reprieve from
why you should pay attention to the the remaining slides. So this does not happen to you or your team.
Yeah. Well, also to let you know that when these types of things happen, you're gonna get an inspection. It could be within a couple of days, it could be a couple of weeks. So it's important to know, okay?
Yeah, so I've definitely had that question before from clients, is like they've gotten a notice that they were going to be inspected. And so I think they call me because we're, auditors here at Saltmarsh, and they feel like it's an audit, so they're like, prep me for this audit that it's coming, so you're going to tell us how they can get ready right now, right?
Yes, we're going to talk about what it is, what they're looking for, and how to get ready. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Yeah. So with those types of situations, the employer, had a certain duty to report to OSHA. So that covers our self-reporting, which is our first bullet. That's how we know an inspection is going to happen. If it's a death, you have 8 hours. If it's a hospitalization of 1 employee, it used to be 3, but a hospitalization now of 1 employee, you have 24 hours. Amputation, loss of consciousness, etc. Employee complaints. So let's say you have an employee and they've been riding you hard and they're like, hey man, this isn't working. We've told you about it before. It's not safe. I don't feel safe. If you don't do anything about it, they can call OSHA. You actually have to teach your employees. They could call OSHA, email OSHA, go online, or go in person. And they're going to make
Kind of like a whistleblower concept.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Exactly, a whistleblower, and that's protected under the whistleblower 11C.
We have those for financial fraud as well.
Oh, great. Okay, yeah. So very similar. Another agency comes out, so the Department of Health, Centers for Disease Control. Some of my clients have to work with ACA, things along those lines. So another agency can report that it's unsafe. If they're sharing trends, so they notice a lot of forklift injuries, they can just come out and pick a sector and say, hey, we're going to pick the Tampa area and check those things out. So strategic targeted inspections, national emphasis programs. So here in Florida, along with other parts of the country, we all got, as of June, the national emphasis on heat-related illnesses. And you have to have a plan for those who work outdoors, those who work indoors, and the heat and the humidity. So you should have that plan. If you don't, you need to get on it quickly. But they have the right now to just stop by and look into your plan.
So that's new, you said? Something that just came out?
Yes, as of June of 2022, that's when it came in place that they have to have a policy, a plan, training, and that OSHA can stop
avoid
by.
like heat illness or heat related issues.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. I mean, that's good for Florida. It was hot this summer.
And they've done it all around the country. So it's a national program. California, Washington, and Oregon have some specific parts of their plan you have to have, but then the rest of us, including Florida, we can fall under the general plan. So we don't have a state specific plan.
Gotcha.
Then they also have follow-up inspections, and that's going to be if abatement. Did you stop the incident? So in regards to the gentleman with the finger, because the rebar bender caught him, right? So what did you do there? Well, we stopped rest of production. We did training with every employee in a language they understood. We had the manufacturer come in and check that equipment. We also had signage, and we had managers walking and supervisors walking as we started the process up again. So did you stop the potential hazard? We took that one out of service as well for the longest time. So they're going to follow up to see, did you fix it? And then blast. Now this one, when I go for my...
So you just said something interesting, because we have quite a few of our clients have a very large Spanish speaking base of team members. And so you mentioned a language that they can understand. Is it up to the employee? Are they required to do training in multiple languages if the majority of their team is a different language, like they're speaking a different language? Is that a requirement on the employer?
Well, the employer needs to ask their employees, what language do you understand better? If it's English, English is great. If it's Spanish, you need to provide that training in Spanish. Same thing for Creole, etc.
Okay.
It can be that you have a foreman who speaks both languages, and he or she is listening to the English version and delivering it at the same time in the Spanish or Creole version.
Okay.
Does provide a lot of their handouts in 2 languages, English and Spanish. You can talk with your insurance agency to see if they can get you other languages, especially Creole, because that's pretty big here in Florida.
Okay, yeah, I was just wondering, like, just speaking of, your policies and your regulations that you're handing out, your employee manuals and things, I just wondered if that had to be in multiple languages, if that was a requirement. I had not heard that before, but you're saying it's not necessarily like all of the employee manuals need to be in both. It's more the safety instruction for equipment, or can you clarify that?
Yes, so training has to be in a language they understand.
Okay.
So training, yes. If you're going to give them written training, they would like you to provide it to them in the language that they understand best. But if you have a interpreter that you either already employ or you bring one in the language that they understand, yes. So I will tell you, when it comes to safety items, you're going to want to have that in both languages.
I was just going to say more is better, I feel like, right now. So having it in both languages, if your primary language is Spanish, I think it would be a good practice or just good business practice to have all of your safety instructions in both languages, I would think.
Yes, just like your required employment posters in Florida, if you have more than 5% of Spanish speaking, you have to have it in both languages. So you have an English one and you have a Spanish one.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah, for sure. So this one that's in bright red on your screen, is not one that you normally hear. I heard it directly from one of my instructors. As an OSHA trainer, I have to go every 4 years and get recertified. And typically the trainers are former compliance officers. So I heard this one specifically. If they do not have enough willful or serious violations, they are told at their local office to go find them. So just like we used to hear in the past about maybe that time of the month, at the end of the month, the cop hasn't received enough citations, they need to go do some more.
So there's like a quota?
Yes, that's what I was told directly from 2 compliance officers.
Yikes. So do they have the right to just show up at anyone's business at any point in time?
They have employees, they do, yes.
Gotcha.
Here's
Yeah,
the other
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, there's a scary part now too. They don't have to show up. They can now use a drone as well.
Oh, geez, that is kind of creepy a little bit. That doesn't violate some kind of privacy laws or something?
Nope.
Wow, well, that is good information.
Yeah, so my office is in Oldsmar in the warehouse district off of like Douglas. And so a lot of the times, especially when it's hot, we leave our big garage doors or bays open, depending on your terminology. And so think about that. A drone could easily fly by, and if they see something, then that gives them, okay, well, here's the reason I'm coming on your site. The heat illness national emphasis program also gives them the right to say, hey, I'm here to inspect your heat program. And that targeted area then can expand to a full inspection.
Wow, that's good information, Michelle. Thanks.
Sure. Yeah. Most people don't know that. And so again, not trying to scare you, just trying to let you know what could happen.
Yeah.
So here are their priorities: imminent danger, serious accidents, employee complaints. Now, we know sometimes we have a habitual complainer. OSHA can see through that. So a lot of the times when they take that call, they'll ask things like, have you recently been written up? Did something else occur? And they'll sometimes just send you a letter or do a telephonic interview with you, the employer, and say, hey, we had a complaint. They won't tell you who, but this is what we need to find out. Can you tell me what your policy is about this, this, and this? And then that's called a desk review. They may just do a desk review. They might not always come out. So that's kind of how employee complaints work. Then again, we talked about agency referrals and targeted inspections, and then those follow-up inspections to see if you abated the situation, and that's corrected or stopped the situation. So with your complaint-based inspections, this is again from your employees, approximately 20% of them are complaint-based. We talked about a desk review, telephone review. Sometimes they'll come out. They're coming out a little bit more right now for that heat emphasis program. They can take anonymous complaints. They're not going to tell you that. They can take them online through telephone. There's also in some states a government accountability office. Something else that most of my clients don't have, but a few of them do, they have unions. And so while down here in Florida, they're not as big as up north where I'm originally from, I will tell you, unions are working in concert with OSHA to bring items to light. So if your shop steward is bringing things towards you and you don't address it, they're going to let their union reps know about it. And then, you know, unions are going to easily call OSHA and let them know because they want to ensure their members are safe as possible.
Right, right.
So when you get an internal complaint, don't just blow it off as Michelle, she's the habitual complainer. Handle all of them properly. Investigate them timely. Make sure there's no retaliation happening. You want to help maintain a healthy and happy workplace. Work in conjunction with your safety department. A lot of my clients are not large enough to have an individual safety department, so that's kind of where I come in and help them and my team. So we'll kind of even sometimes lead those investigations just so they can say, hey, they are being handled properly, right?
Now, do you advise clients to have these written and like their action response in writing? So if the employee makes a complaint, they would like log it and then they would write up like a written response of how they addressed it. Is that good business practice or not?
Great business practice. Now you definitely always want to log it and show like that you looked into it, and if it was substantiated or not. You don't necessarily have to provide a written response to the complainant, but you do need to follow up with them and say, hey, Michelle, I was not able to find this happening right now, but please let me know the minute you see it the next time so I can catch it in action. That way it shows you care because you truly ultimately do care about your employees.
Yeah, I love your the bottom bullet. If that's not a requirement, I think that's great business practice to have like a safety committee where employees are giving their suggestions. I'm a big proponent of taking employee suggestions because they tell you what's going on the floor sometimes when you don't know always not on the floor. So I think that's great. Is that a requirement, that fourth bullet, or is that a good suggestion?
Having the employees part of it is not a requirement. A safety committee is a strong suggestion, but the employee part, because again, like you mentioned, you don't always know what's actually going on the floor, especially if you have multiple shifts like many of my manufacturing clients do.
Right, right. That's a great best business practice, I think, that fourth bullet there.
Yep, absolutely. So then moving on with our internal complaints, you want to review your procedures for employees to raise safety and health concerns. You want to make sure that all work orders are being handled timely, especially if there's safety concerns. You want to survey your employees and get their commitment. And do they think we're actually committed as employers to their safety? And then even those near misses, like, oh man, I almost got taken out by that forklift. We need to investigate. Why did that happen? Was it as simple as we left a key on our forklift that could have taken someone's life? So you definitely want to investigate those, even if they're not the ones that needed more than first aid. You want to have full investigation about it. I'm not saying necessarily you always have to do the full detailed root cause analysis, but I will tell you, I have found that to be super helpful in not only preventing safety, but also reducing that bind up that sometimes happen because maybe it was simply we didn't have the right product, and so it's slowing down our production, and then that's costing us money as well.
I think the survey is great. I know, I feel like everyone at Saltmarsh, whenever we start a new survey, is like, oh, it's another survey. But they really do tell you what's going on, and the team usually fills them out if they have comments. And so the ones that fill them out are the ones that have comments and want to make sure that you know about them. So although it can seem like an arduous process to survey employees, it's, you know, in some of the bigger companies, you know, it says 350 people in a plant, you can't go around and ask every person and get their verbal feedback. So doing something like a survey is the most effective, most efficient way to retain information. So I like that suggestion as well.
Yeah, and depending on your payroll firm that you utilize, a lot of them have surveys that you can build already. And so it quickly
that's
sends,
cool.
yeah, it quickly sends the employee a message. You can specifically do safety ones and do them
Probably
quarterly.
just do it in an app or something then, right? That's awesome. So that
Yeah,
makes it much less arduous. We should get one of those here.
yeah. So Survey Monkey or your payroll firm, just make it a little bit easier for you and your team too, because they can get you an answer right away.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Awesome. All right, so let's talk about what happens in an OSHA inspection now, right? So notice, you mentioned earlier that some of your clients say, hey, you're going to be receiving an inspection. You don't always get notice that they're coming, okay? And actually, it's against the law if someone who complained told someone at the business that you guys are about to get an inspection. So there's, you know, penalties against that as well. So they're going to say that they're there. They're going to say the reason of their inspection. Are they there for partial, meaning, hey, you know, based on the person that lost their finger, we're here to inspect that, or a comprehensive, which means they're going to look at all of it. I will tell you, and I have it here on your slide, just because they say it's a partial, as they're walking around, if they see something or an employee says something, they can expand their scope to a full comprehensive inspection. If you get the notice, it'll tell you when, they'll tell you what day. Sometimes you don't know what day they're going to come. They're going to show you their credentials. I'm going to tell you to ask for their business card as well. The reason I'm going to tell you that is sometimes they're going to ask for documentation, and you have the right to ask for a little bit of time. Most people don't know that because the OSHA officer is saying, hey, I really want to see this before I leave, but you have some time to turn that documentation in.
Well, that's good to know, because we get that question a lot too with us as well. We ask the client for something and we want it as soon as possible to help us keep moving. So that's good to know that they can ask for some leeway, because sometimes it does take time to pull data and pull information and pull manuals and documents and support and things like that. So that's a great tip. I didn't know that either. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason I tell you to do this, you want to look at what you're giving them too, because if you have a whole policy and you're just going to willy-nilly give them the whole policy, I'm going to give them exactly what they asked for.
What they asked for, yep.
Yeah.
So is that where you help too, from a consulting standpoint? If someone has this and they need to provide documents, you would help them get ready and prep them on how to answer questions and things like that?
Yes, so all of my clients know, whether it's myself or one of my 2 team members, if another client gets an OSHA visit, they know, unless it's a life and death emergency, we're leaving and going to go help that other client, because they would want us to do the same thing for them. And so we have that under.
Oh, that's awesome. So you even show up on site when they're there so that you could be the intermediary and make sure they don't say anything stupid.
Yes.
It happens. We do the same with the IRS audits, things like that. Like, let us talk to the IRS, because you may say something that you didn't mean to say. So it's really similar. It's always good to get a professional on your side that knows the ins and outs, because that can be some scary stuff.
Absolutely. And we work in unison with several OSHA attorneys in the general area here. And usually what happens is with Bluetooth, not with holding a phone, as I'm driving to wherever OSHA has just shown up, I'm calling one of those. I have them on speed dial, so that we either get them as part of it if we need, or they're there if I have questions.
Like they're on alert. Yeah, that's great. That's such a great service.
Yeah, you want a full team helping you because you don't want to misspeak. And you know, even I do that sometimes. So I always have to think about
Everyone overshare. You overshare, you know?
Yes, yes. So I mentioned earlier about the drones that they can take those and then show up and say, hey, we've seen this. So videos or pictures from off-site. There is a local warehouse that I work with, and they are right by a gas station. And so their employees were complaining while they were getting like Gatorades and things like that at the gas station. Well, there happened to be a compliance officer. And so he sat in his vehicle and pointed his camera that has a 7x zoom directly at the guys as they walked back into the workplace.
That guy is on high alert.
That's how they started their inspection. So
Don't
I
mess
actually
with the OSHA guys. I need to get them as an auditor here.
Yes, they've actually asked me to come work for them. I'm like, no, I'm good, thanks.
Yeah, I know. I don't want to be on that side. I want to be on the side helping the client.
Yeah, exactly. So just to let you know that they can use those photos, and sometimes I take those photos in this opening conference, which is the first part. They're going to explain the nature and the purpose. Then they're going to want to do the walk around. So I take those pictures and I take a copy of them with my phone, and I'll text them to the site foreman or the site superintendents or whichever title you have your people with. And so as we are walking around, they know that OSHA is here, and so they're going to be respectful to them if they're asked a question, things along those lines. Both the employer and the employee can designate representatives to accompany the officer. The officer is going to take photos, they're going to gather records, they're going to do some interviews, they're going to take some samples. They may engage others to help them as well, so other compliance officers could show up. And then they're going to, like I mentioned, ask for documents and records and things like that, okay? Then they're going to do that, then they'll have your closing conference. Now I have on here, it could be 6 months later because they have to review all the documents. They also could take a longer time if you're using any subcontractors or temporary labor to help out with this, or if you had a vendor, maybe an electrical vendor replacing something in your workspace, they may need to see the agreements you have in place. So that's why it could take up to 6 months. And sometimes people avoid talking to the compliance officer, and we want to minimize that delay as much as possible. So I mentioned they're going to take some pictures and videos. If you're unsure what they're looking at, you have the right to ask them to clarify it. They will tell you. If they point something out and say, hey, Michelle, if you can get this corrected before I leave today, do everything in your power to get it corrected correctly, not just like throw it together, because that could limit.
Too. So if it's something easy or quick, like a light bulb's burn out, I don't know if that's in violation, but you know, that would be easy fix. You could get that done right away.
Yes, so a great example would be if you have, this will be a construction example, but scaffolding getting erected and it doesn't have your top rail, your mid rail, and your toe board. Let's say it's missing one of those. If we can get those put in place and then follow back up with them and say, hey, we've gotten this corrected while you're still here, will you look at it? And so then it can minimize or reduce even having it at all.
Good to know.
Yeah. So let's say they come and they want to do the inspection and you're like, hold on, our safety director is not here. You can ask them to give you some time for that person to show up.
Oh, that's such a good tip, because I think like you started with, you don't know what you don't know, right? I think most people think they're at just the hands of OSHA, you know, that whenever they show up, you know, you don't have any leeway, like there's no discussion, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. Like I definitely feel like people feel like they have their hands tied. So that's great to know, because that sometimes does happen. like they're at lunch or they're at a job site or they're at a different plant or, you know, something like that. So that's a great tip.
Yes. Now, they can give you up to 2 hours. Most of them are only going to give you an hour. So you definitely want to have a backup representative. The other thing you want to do is make sure they are not free to walk around your work site. Either pop them in a conference room and have them just stay in that conference room, or have them wait in their vehicle. If it's hot out, I'm going to recommend you have them wait in your conference room or an empty office that doesn't have any documents. Unfortunately, some places have receptionists, both males and females, and just as of
Like to chat.
I'm sorry?
That like to chat, right?
Yes, they like to chat, or just out of trying to be respectful, because they know, hey, if OSHA's here, be respectful. If OSHA compliance officer asks them a question, they'll answer it. Well, we don't want that.
Right.
No answering until our representative here. So don't lock them away. I don't mean it that way, but put them in a conference room where it's air conditioned, get them some water, soda, coffee, those type of things. Be careful offering them food, because you don't want it to look like you're trying to bribe an officer, just like a police officer.
Funny fact is IRS agents cannot even accept coffee from the auditee because it's seen as a form of bribe. So you cannot go to lunch, you can't take them to lunch, you can't give them food, you can't give them anything that could be construed as a bribe. So that's interesting. A lot of this stuff sounds very similar to like when an IRS auditor comes. It's the same thing. Put them in a conference room and give them a glass of water.
Yep, absolutely. A lot of them are that way. Basically, any federal agent, you kind of want to have them sit down and drink some water.
Yeah.
You could potentially ask for them to come back on a different day. But before you do that, contact your safety consultant and or your attorney. Reason being is they will say, well, just because you say it's not a good time, there's really never a good time for us to come by. So that's not a reason. But if you start to push it a little bit, they can say, you know what, I'll be back, but I'll be back with a warrant and police. And you don't want it to get that route unless it's severely bad. And so that's where myself and attorneys, we're going to say, listen, your site's bad. We're going to risk you getting that warrant. This is our suggestion. Obviously, you make the final decision, but typically we're not going to suggest that, okay? Just because it could be way worse. And where you may have got the, if you correct this before we go, you're not getting any of that. They're going to be guns a-blazing, not literally, fully getting after you for every little thing. Even those de minimis ones, they're going to get after you for it. And then no matter what, even when they are driving you bonkers, always be nice and treat them with respect. Because one told us what happened. He walked in and the HR person actually introduced him as the idiot from OSHA to a whole bunch of people. And he was fully embarrassed and he threw everything he could at them. They walked out with over $5 million of citations.
Yikes, that's a lesson in just human respect, if you ask me.
Human decency sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mentioned if they're taking photos, take the same photos, ask them if they're measuring something, like you see the one gentleman, he's got his finger at the line. Some things have to be a certain distance and it can't even be a half an inch off. So if they're measuring it, take those same photos. You're not supposed to take pictures of OSHA inspectors. I don't know how this one potentially got in there, but he was measuring something and I was trying to show you an example. He's lost a bunch of weight, so he doesn't look like that anymore. So he knows that he's actually in my slideshow, and he told me, just don't say my
permission. That's funny.
Yeah, at least he's got it. He's over in Orlando. He's got a great persona about himself. All right. So let's talk about the employer rights during that inspection. I mentioned you have the right to accompany the officer. You have the right to attend managerial interviews. So as I mentioned, they're going to interview employees. They're going to interview different employees, different levels. They may ask for a roster, or they may just say, go find me some people, or they'll go pick them themselves, okay? If they're asking them as Michelle, the human resources manager or the safety manager, then your employer representative can sit in that meeting. If they're asking as Michelle, the employee, you cannot sit in that meeting, okay? You have the right to get a copy of the complaint, but you won't know who sent it. You have the right to protect trade secrets. And as I previously mentioned, you have the right to require that warrant prior to inspection. But again, ask your safety consultant and or your attorney first before doing that.
So you've talked about the rights of employers during the inspections. Do the employees have any rights or not?
Yeah, great question. So the employees do have some rights during this. As I mentioned previously, they have the right to accompany the officer on the tour. They have that right to talk freely to the OSHA compliance officer. So you would give them either a conference room or a office, and they have the right to talk to them without you being present. They also have the right to ask for their representative to be there. So if it's a union person, they may ask for their shop steward. If it is a standard employee, non-union, they may ask for one of their employees to sit with them as well. They have the right to do that. They also have the right to see a copy of the complaint. They have the right to point out different things. So if we're looking specifically at that storage room that I showed you earlier today, they have the right to say, well, you thought that was bad. I want you to come see my work area. They have the right to do that.
Got it. Good to know.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So they do have some rights as well. They also have the right to meet with the compliance officer off-site if they are worried about retaliation. So they do have those rights. All right, so we've done our walkthrough. We've had our interviews. Now, at the end, typically at the end of the day, they'll say, hey, we're seeing some things, or when you're walking around, they're going to say, this isn't all right. You know that you have to have your fire extinguishers hung and not sitting on the ground and things like that. So they're going to issue a citation with potential penalties within that 6 months. That is considered reasonable promptness. Now, the compliance officer that comes out is typically not the person who's going to issue things. They are typically going to write the report and give it to their supervisor. The supervisor would be the one who would be issuing the reports, the findings, and assigning a dollar amount towards it.
So the person that comes out isn't necessarily the one that will issue that citation. They're just taking notes to send it to their supervisor when they get back to the office.
Correct. And most times they can provide some documentation like, hey, Michelle and Suzanne were really helpful. They made sure things got corrected timely while I was there. So they can influence.
Okay.
So I've known twice that they've actually gone to bat for the employer against the supervisor to say, don't give them a willful.
To be nice and respectful.
They'll quote the specific standard, whether it's OSHA standard or it's an ANSI, which is the American Society for Safety, or if it's a national electrical code or any of those types. They're going to actually state it. You remember earlier when we talked about that general duty 5A, where it's like your right to keep it safe and healthy work environment? If they cannot find a specific standard, they're going to quote it under that general duty 5A.
Kind of covers everything, right?
Correct.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I was going to say they'll find a way.
Absolutely. And then they're going to give you a reasonable time to abate, okay? And that means to correct it, stop it, etc. So the fines. Remember I said they're going to assign a dollar amount. So these are the willful, serious, other than serious, repeated, and failure to abates. And this is the maximum penalty for 2022. It's going to go up again.
That was like the forklift guy, that was the willful one, right?
Yes. So they can go up to $145,000.
For each violation, right? So that would have been a couple of them. Remember, it was like the exit doors and the forklift key. So you're looking at like $300,000 just in maybe those two.
Yeah, it gets worse. They could actually say times the number of employees exposed to that.
Oh my goodness, which could be your whole warehouse.
Correct. So times 50.
Right. Oh my goodness. Now, does the employer have any options? Can they fight these? Can they say like, oh, I don't know. Do they have any recourse? Like, what is their, what do they have?
Yeah, great question. I actually have a slide in just a couple that I'm going to kind of talk to you a little bit about that. But
okay,
you do
good.
have
I'm getting ahead because I'm like, holy cow, that's a lot of money. And like, do they have any appeal, you know?
Sure. Well, and here's something else that's really important about this slide. There's the fourth one down says repeated, okay? So let me tell you how bad a repeated can be. Many of our employers have multiple locations. They could have a couple of plants, different offices, things like that. Even if it's in another state, if let's say ABC liquor store had one that was a serious, and so that maximum was only 14,000. But another store had the exact same situation, that new store now gets it as a repeated.
Oh my, yeah, that would make
So,
sense. I was looking at the willful because you already knew it was an issue and you ignored it, right? But it would be fall into repeated. Got it.
so this is where it's really important that your locations all are following the same rules, regulations, still having your self audits and then other people coming in and auditing it, but that you're in communication. So, you know, if you and I are working together and you get one, you should be picking up the phone and saying, hey, Michelle, I just got
Right.
X, Y, and Z.
You gotta fix this because, yeah. Now, what is that failure to abate? Like you haven't fixed it, so you get fined for every day that you haven't fixed it?
Yes, exactly that. So we talked about they gave you a reasonable time frame. So let's say 30 days to fix it. Day 31 and every day after that you don't fix that, you're getting a $14,000 charge.
Wow. So it behooves the employer to fix this immediately to avoid further like penalties and so forth. And then at that point, like you said, it could be possibly a repeated offense if they've got other stores or other plants with the same issues. So if they didn't fix those plants either, that could be really bad.
Yes, yes. And then I have another shocker for you. Again, please don't shoot the messenger. But in some plants, they have emergency exits like they're supposed to, but they lock them so that people can't get in. But the only way to lock it is where it's locked on the inside as well. Well, there's something that happens with that. That goes willful, and it's a criminal sanction. Let's talk about those. If a willful violation occurred that has resulted in a death, the court imposes a fine, up to 6 months in jail, or both. And depending on where you fall, whether you're an individual or a corporation, this is your fine on top of everything else.
So like you said, this could be if somebody locked an exit door and someone couldn't get out of it, that would be a criminal conviction?
If they died, yeah.
Oh, if they died, okay. But still, that's so, is it just like, do you have another example of like, besides the door one, like what would be another one?
Yeah, failure to provide the top rail. If they have to go upstairs to maybe put something in to a machine, or they need to carry something upstairs, or if they're pulling order supplies and they have the rolling racks and they don't have the railing to protect them from falling over, that would be a willful if they fell to their death.
Okay, so I just reread it and understood. So that it's on the last slide, it's a willful violation but results in death. That's the kicker there, is it resulted in death. That means that the individual or corporation, whatever it may be, would be also additionally subject to these fines and possibly jail time. Got it. Wow, that's, I mean, but you don't want to be negligent about your employee safety, so.
So a couple of slides ago, you asked me about what happens, what can we do? Because that's a lot of money, right? Well, you have 15 days to request an informal conference or contest the citations. So let's say they hit us for $145,000. Yes, it was a willful, but it's brand new. No one's been in that area, so people weren't actually exposed yet. It was a new machine getting put in, a new work location, something along those lines. We can go and try to negotiate it down. Okay, you do have to post the citation up no matter what. You can negotiate that penalty. My former compliance officer instructor, in fact, I have his cell phone number. So sometimes when I'm on a site, I call him and say, if I sold this, how would I fix this so I wouldn't get a violation? I do that sometimes just to help out my clients, but you can reduce it. And so he said most companies don't know that they can try to get it reduced and end up just stroking a check for $5 million.
Yeah, that's, I mean, that's my discussions with clients have been just that. No one, to my knowledge, has ever contested, even if they believe, like in the case you just gave, was it's like a new area of the shop and they literally just had something sitting there, but nobody's working over there. That would be a very good reason to contest it, I would think. That, hey, this wasn't in danger, nobody was in danger, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't think a lot of people know that for sure, that they can contest it. So is that something you help people with?
Yes, because I will try to contest everything I can. The lowest that they, right now for 2022, that they will take a willful down to is $9,000.
Okay.
When you,
that's a big difference. I mean, that's a big amount. Like that's, yeah, 100 and what was it, $30,000 difference. So
exactly.
So
that's why I make it
worth it, right?
Yeah, make a point to at least try, right?
Yeah.
You can also appeal if needed. So you would be going to the informal citation conference with the supervisor, the one who wrote the letter. You can appeal it if he or she still just won't change it. You can appeal, and then it would go to court. And then we have a jury that we have to work with sometimes, but sometimes it's just, especially if like workers' comp resulted in it, it may just be the judge that's making the decision. All right, so let's talk about our top 10 frequently cited. This was fiscal year 2021, and that runs from October 1st of 20 to September 30th of 21. So the fiscal year 2022 just ended, so we don't have that yet. We anticipate to get that very soon. But we have fall protection in construction, respiratory protection in general industry, ladders in construction, scaffolding in construction, the hazard communication standard in general industry. And that is having the books that say SDS for safety data sheets versus MSDS, having our pictograms with our GHS labels. Remember the blue bottle of we didn't know what, and it had a label, but nothing was figured out, and we didn't have any of our pictograms. Those fall under that, plus the training of each chemical your employee is exposed to falls under the hazard communication standard. Then we have control of hazardous energy, a lockout tagout in general industry, fall protection training requirements in both industries, eye and face protection in both industries, powered industrial trucks in general industry, so that's going to be your forklifts, okay? And then machinery or machine guarding in general industry. So this is, did we tamper with a guard? Did we remove a guard?
Got it.
Okay.
So in like the case of fall protection, what exactly does that mean? Like, 'cause that's the number one issue or cited issue. What does that look like?
So I'm going to start with the fall protection training requirements for both. So you have to train all of your employees on some general topics when they're new hires and then annually. And in general industry, anything that they walk up that's over 4 feet, they have to wear fall protection if there's not railings and guards to protect them from falling. Same thing if it's a fall down. So some of the machinery that I have seen in some of the warehouses, there's a big step down. We need to have a railing up there so an employee doesn't fall in that opening.
So then the like number one would be if they didn't have those things.
Yeah, so they weren't wearing their actual fall harnesses with their lanyards and didn't use railings and didn't have their signage. Yes.
Got it. Okay. Cool. Thanks. That's interesting. So like the ladders, that's like not having the appropriate ladders, and the risk is people falling and things. Same thing with scaffolding kind of concept.
Yes, not appropriate, not positioned or set up correctly. Also, broken rungs, rust, those types of things.
Like crappy scaffolding.
Yes. And a low-hanging fruit item on ladders, the stickers on the side, they have to be readable. They have to tell you what, proper weights. And so
Like how to, work it. Yeah.
Yeah, not just what you weigh, but also your tools or what you're carrying. Those types of things, those are very, very, very low hanging fruits, but they can get you easy, and that would be times the number of ladders you have.
Right.
It's
good stuff, Michelle.
All right, so let's get prepared for your teams. You want to make sure that everyone knows to be courteous, right? We've talked about what can happen if you're not. Encourage regular communication with your staff so they feel that they can come to you and say, hey, Michelle, the ladders are looking pretty rugged. It's about time we spend that money to go get some new ones. And yes, I know they can be upwards of $500, but $500 now versus $145,000 or worse, someone died or got physically harmed or maimed because we didn't spend $500 in that ladder, right? Delegate who's going to be your main point of contact for OSHA. And it may be a different person at each location. So it should always be a company representative. Myself or your OSHA attorneys can be employer representatives, but you have to be a company representative. So is it going to be your CEO? Maybe not. Is it going to be your safety director? Probably. Is it going to be your HR person? Unless they're doing safety, probably not going to be them as your main contact. You want to make sure whoever your main contacts are, you get them some extra training, and we can help with that. Or there's other people too. I don't mean just me, but pick who you think's best for your company, right? Plan who's going to attend. I always say if you have HR, have them come as the note taker because they're really good at that. You also want to be pictures. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Oh, I just said HR people, very detailed with the documentation,
Yes, very detailed, and you want that, right? You want to make sure your posters are up to date. So those all-in-one posters you can buy, make sure they're up to date. It's always good if you maybe had it from a PEO that you used to have or a different employer payroll company and you have a new one. If it still says like ADP and you're with Paylocity, make sure you get rid of those because you know you need new signs. And in Florida, we just updated in September, where it used to be January, the minimum wage. So you want to make sure that's up there as well. Because while they're typically going to look at federal posters, they're going to just look in general at all of them. Okay. All right, so you want to ensure your staff, your supervisors, and your managers know what the company policies are and where the safety data sheet books are. You also want to make sure that if you have 11 or more employees, you have written policies and they're up to date and you're actually following them. If you don't follow what's in your policy, update your policy, okay? You also want to have access to 5 years of your OSHA 300 and 300A logs. Even if you did not have accidents, you still have to have an OSHA log. If you are coming in new to your company or your company prior didn't do it, let's reach out to your workers' comp insurance carrier and get your loss runs. Let's get as much caught up as you can. You don't want to backdate them when you sign them, but you want to say, hey, we realized we didn't have this, so we have done everything in our power to get caught up, and here are our loss runs, okay? And then ensure your training that your employees are going through, their new hire and then their annual, is organized by date and topic. So lockout, tag out 2022, lockout, tag out 2021. And all of your employees that are exposed to that need to have the training. You want to have general awareness training for all employees, but specific training for those who are using it as well, okay? All right, now this one gets people a little frazzled. So I'm telling you now so that you can get prepared. Whatever your agreement is with your subcontractors or your temporary agencies, you want to have it clearly defined who's responsible for carrying the workers' comp insurance, who's responsible for providing supervision, who's responsible for safety training. Even if all of that is on them, you want to make sure that before that person starts working on your site, they've received some general site training from you, your company. It could be recorded, it could be given in live person, but you want to make sure that person has training on what are your safety measures, what are your specific codes if you use codes, what chemicals are they exposed to, how to properly use them, what PPEs. If their company didn't provide them PPEs, are you going to send them home or are you going to provide the PPEs? You need to get that. You want to keep a log of who you're training as well. The reason I say that, one of my construction sites in Davenport, there was a gentleman who fell 30 feet. He was installing fire sprinkler suppression. He was taking a picture on a balcony of his work. There was signage everywhere for him to wear fall protection and the layoff system that he was supposed to hook up to, okay? He did not do that. OSHA came in. They were going to hit both the general contractor, who I was engaged by, and the subcontractor. So it was going to be a 50-50 split. Because we had documented proof that weekly because it was a bad job, weekly I was doing safety walkthroughs with pictures, and there's proof that we had the lanyard, we had the signage, training, all of that. The general contractor didn't end up getting that. The subcontractor did.
That's a really good point, to be clear on who does what, and to make sure that, like, if you're the GC, that you're crossing your T's and dotting your I's kind of thing. Make sure it's not you at the end of the day. So that's very applicable. I think, like you said, this slide probably gets people frazzled, but it's good to know these things.
Yep. The other one I want to talk about real quickly is about your temporary employees. I love staffing companies because they help us when we need to get jobs done, right? The problem is, one of them that was on that same job site, we found out during all of this, would have their people come. They would provide hard hats, gloves, etc. And we would put a sticker on their hard hat after they have completed the general contractor job site training. We found out that the staffing company would pick those hard hats up at the end of the day. And then the next day, whoever was coming to our site,
other people,
they would get those same hard hats. So we thought everyone was trained and they weren't. So we had to implement the system.
Goodness. And that's on the company then to, like, monitor that.
So make sure you're watching that kind of stuff, because that's really important. Then with your portable fire extinguishers, do not only rely on your annual inspection. You want to make sure that you're doing your monthly checks. You're looking to see if the yellow pin is in the green area. If not, it's either needing to be charged or overcharged, and this could be listed as a willful for a life resource, but it's generally going to be done as a serious. For your walking and working surfaces I mentioned earlier, you want to make sure you have a clear path. So the picture that has where you need to kind of snake through the corridor is not good. Everything needs to be stored on one side. The picture that's showing you stuff on either side but has a lip and a curb, that's where the exit would need to happen. So it's not wide enough and it's not clear. They actually would have to step over something. So in the event of emergency, it would be a trip hazard. So you want to fix this as much as possible.
Even in a regular situation, that's a trip hazard.
Sure. Yep, yep. Then your first aid kits. These expire. Most people don't know those. Some companies use the same box and just replace the stuff that's inside. That's fine, except the expiration on the outside of the box is going to show it's expired. So then you have to go and fight through that. Look, all my Band-Aids are not expired. All my gauze is not expired. So it's important to—
Good information, because my husband collects Band-Aids, I swear. And we have like an entire Band-Aid factory in our bathroom. And I'm going to go home and be like, look, they're expired. We have to get rid of them. This is good information, people.
Awesome. And so if you need to know what items you need to have based on your industry and your size, refer to Appendix A on the ANSI Z308.1. It's here in your slide, and it's going to tell you the minimum first aid kit contents you need to have. All right, so I hope I didn't scare you too bad, but gave you some new things to put in place and some maybe updates to make. But if you have questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm here as a resource for you. And I want to thank you for having me.
There was a lot of good information in there, guys. So like Michele said, if there's any follow-up, be glad to answer or direct you over to Michele and make sure you get your questions answered. You can send them. I think Nancy's about to tell us, but thanks again, Michele. That was great.
Thank you.
That was amazing. Thank you so much, Michele, for taking some time to sit down with us. I'm sure our audience found that very insightful, and they probably will have questions, and then you can answer all of them for them. Just a few housekeeping notes to close us out. If you submitted questions, we will follow up with you or direct you to Michele. Today's webinar was recorded, and you'll receive a link to that recording along with the slide deck in your emails tomorrow. This presentation was approved for 1 SHRM PDC and 1 HRCI credit. So if you attended with us today on 10/27, you'll also receive a certificate for this webinar. And after this webinar ends, immediately after, you'll be prompted to complete a short survey. We'd like to know all your feedback and any additional questions or anything you want to share with us. So thank you again for all joining us, and thank you, Michele.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.